8 subintervals of equal width from 0 to 4. So these would be the 8 subintervals, but then we need to use midpoints. So we actually need to use the values here. We'll blow that up a little bit. These points, the midpoints of each of those 8 subintervals. I'm going to go ahead and do this problem with summation notation and then use the calculator to do the calculation very fast. So we're going to have 8 subintervals, and for each of those rectangles, the widths are exactly the same. The width of this interval, which is 4, divided by the number of rectangles, which is 8. So the width is 1/2. As for the height, that's going to be the y value, e to the negative 2x plus 1. And what do we put in for the x value? Well, the x values are the midpoints of each rectangle. And those are the x values of these green dots. So what are the x values of these green dots? Well, if this was 4 and 2, then this is 3 and 1. So this blue line is at 1/2. And this green dot is 1/2 of the way to 1/2. So this green dot is 1/4. Then what's the next green dot? Well, the next green dot will be how far away from the first green dot. It would be the width of the rectangle, which is 4/8 or 1/2. So the next green dot will be at this green dot's x value, 1/4, plus the width of the rectangle, which is 1/2. So I'm going to keep common denominators. What would the third x dot be? It'll be the first dot plus 2 widths, or in other words, the x value of the first dot plus 2 of those widths. Well, that means we could think of this as 1 of those widths. And for the next green dot, which is going to be this one here, its x value will be the original x value, which is 1/4, plus the width once, twice, 3 times. So our x value will always be 1/4 plus a certain number of rectangular widths. However, if I is equal to 1, we're saying that our very first midpoint is 1/4 plus a width once. But that's not our first rectangle. Our first rectangle is when it's just 1/4 plus a 0 2/4. So instead of adding the 8 rectangular areas as I goes from 1 to 8, I'm going to change this from 0 to 7. Let's make that little change. Okay, so now we'll still have the 8 rectangles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and when I is 0, then we will have an x value, which is inside the red brackets, of 1/4 plus 0, which is our first x value, 1/4 plus 0, or just 1/4. And then when I is equal to 1, our input in the brackets will be 1/4 plus 2/4 times 1, which is 1/4 to the right plus 2/4 once. And when we get to 7, our input will be 1/4 plus the width of a rectangle 7 times, which is 1/4 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. That will be our input. This is our expression, and now we'll enter that onto our calculator. And remember, like somebody let me know in class, the summation symbol is found under the math key. Math and then choice 0. And this was choice B, about 4.480. If you thought that was too conceptually difficult algebraically, then you could use the list feature under the stats button. Stat. When you hit stat edit, you could enter the list 1 values of 0 through 7, which would be our 8 rectangles. And then you could enter 0.25 plus 1/2 of this number, which gives you all those midpoint values for each of the 8 subintervals. And then we could hit list 3, enter, and enter that it's the area of each rectangle. Each rectangle's width was a half. Each rectangle's height is this function entered in y1, so y1, using these midpoint x values as the input. And then when you add up list 3, this was another way to do the same problem. Choice B.